there, I traveled around a lot. I traveled around and photographed the Southwest and Colorado. I traveled to the Southwest photographing the Colorado Plateau. This is Monument Valley with the East Mitten shadow on the West Mitten that only occurs once a year and only if weather conditions are perfect. And uh, also traveled to the Wave a couple of times. Some of you have heard of the Wave. This is actually what's known as the second wave. It's accessible only by a permit. And some of the canyons of Utah. This is Spider Rock and Canyon de Chelly. And also explored a lot of the canyons of Utah. This is an old Indian ruin known as the Dow House, kind of in a remote canyon of Utah. Of course, being in Colorado, I also photographed Colorado mountains. This is Capitol Peak in the autumn with at sunrise with aspen just about to turn. And I explored the eastern plains of Colorado. These are Pawnee Buttes in the northwest of Colorado and the canyons of Colorado as well. This is western Colorado. It's in Rattlesnake Canyon, which is the a canyon in Colorado, which has the highest concentration of arches, second only to Moab. And in this short canyon, there's about seven arches, and this is one of them. It's at the end of a long jeep road and then about a 2 mile hike. And of course, being in Colorado, I also photographed old grist mills. This is a kind of an iconic structure in Colorado. It's the end of about a 3 mile jeep road called Crystal Mill along the Crystal River. It's actually a power generation facility. But my daughter moved to Georgia in 2006. And frankly, when she moved to Georgia, my first reaction was, Georgia, come on. What am I going to photograph in Georgia? My impression of Georgia was the Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport. And I know that's not fair, but I flew in and out of it, and that was my only vision of Georgia. And and I was pleasantly surprised at how diverse and how interesting Georgia is. But when she moved here, I started searching for photogenic locations. Of course, like all of us, I went into the North Georgia mountains and found Anna Ruby Falls and found that was very photogenic. Also hiked into some of the back trails and photographed streams. And I really need to comment here a difference that I found in terms of photographing between Georgia and the West. In the West, I like to pay attention to my histogram and look at the three channels, the three color channels, to make sure that I have the right exposure. And I find in the West that you really got to pay attention to the red channel because everything out there is brown, yellow, orange, red, etc. So the red channel is real easy to overexpose. But I found that to be different here in Georgia because everything's so green and there's so much water compared to Colorado. And so I really had to pay attention to the green channel. But of course, in exploring around, I also found, this is Lake Lanier at sunrise. I'm sure a lot of you, these are common to you, but they were pretty new to me. And but one day I stumbled across Pools Mill Covered Bridge, and this is in North Forsyth County. And it's easily accessible. It's part of a Forsyth County park. And I found that through another uh, habit that I have, I guess you would call it, and that's geocaching. A lot of times when I go to new areas that I've never been before, I look for geocaches, which is kind of a worldwide treasure hunt. People hide treasures throughout the world. There's about 6 million in the entire world. And so I just look in the local area to see if there is a geocache there, because often people hide a geocache in a real picturesque location. And turns out there was a geocache at Pools Mill Covered Bridge. So I went to find the cache and photographed the bridge. So that kind of set me on a path to start looking for bridges. Of course, if you drive up in the North Georgia mountains, you can hardly miss the Nora Mill and just outside of Helen. And this is a historic mill that's fully operational. I'm sure most of you have probably been there. And but it was new to me. It was a fascinating uh, building, and it sets in a beautiful location right on the shores of the Chattahoochee River. So that got me thinking about trying to focus on a particular project. And when I was in Colorado, I did a lot of my photography was on a project. I would choose a project like the Red Rocks of the Front Range or the rocks of Colorado Springs or old mining memorabilia in throughout Colorado or Indian ruins in Utah. And that tends to get me to focus on something. So that got me to begin to focus on just mills and covered bridges uh, throughout Georgia. And so the first thing is where are the mills and the covered bridges? And I'll talk to you a little bit about that, of how I discovered. And the second thing, when I found these, I was interested in the history. And I didn't care about a long, extensive history, but I was interested in when was it built and when did it quit operating, what happened to it, maybe a little bit of a story behind it. So, talking about mills a little bit, this is Barker's Creek Mill in Rayburn County, up in, almost to the border of North Carolina. So, how did I find mills? Well, primarily, there's an organization known as the Society for the Preservation of Old Mills, or SPOON, and it maintains a database of all the states and by state and county of all the mills that are located that they know of that are located in these states. And if you look at that, you find out that Spoon lists about 300 mill sites throughout the state of Georgia. Well, the first thing I did was eliminated textile mills because I really was textile mills tend to be large and industrial, et cetera. So I tried to restrict myself just to the smaller grist mills that were located in throughout Georgia. And also the list of spoon list doesn't, excuse me, all it really does is tell you the location. It doesn't really tell you if there's actually a mill there. In many cases, there's nothing there. It's just where a mill was located. But it's a good starting point. So I started traveling around Georgia a lot, and and to locate the mills, I also talked to a lot of historical societies and different county historical societies, et cetera, and ended up starting to identify these mills. And I traveled to all these mills over about a 4 or 5 year period. And I'll show you the summary of that in a moment. It's just a little bit about the history of mills. The first mill in Georgia was built in 1740 on the Ebenezer River near Savannah, Georgia, and it actually operated until 1935. Now there's really not any trace of it. Mills were quite extensive throughout Georgia. In 1876, the Georgia Department of Agriculture listed 1,262 mills in operation, and even by the 1900 census, it listed a little over 1,100 mills still in operation. But these mills began to close down. First of all, the mills existed more as a community center. You have to think back to the 19th century when there was no roads, or the roads were very limited. So these mills ended up just serving a small area of about a 10-mile radius to enable the farmers to take care of the produce. And it ended up being a community center, or a town would end up growing up around it. And like I said, it served about a 10-mile radius. And it really was kind of the precursor of industrialization in the Americas. Now, on bridges, this is Howard's Bridge down in central Georgia. It was a little easier to find locations of of bridges. The Georgia Department of Transportation maintains a list of all the historical bridges in Georgia. There's also a national organization that lists I should say, lists just covered bridges in all the states. But it lists every covered bridge there is. If a developer built a housing development and had a little stream and he built a covered bridge on it as an amenity, it would be listed. So I restricted my whole search to just covered historical covered bridges and searched for those. In the 1870s, there were about 10,000 covered bridges throughout the United States. And now there's only about 750 left in the United States. The state that has the most is Pennsylvania with 213, and Ohio has 148. So there's still a lot of covered bridges throughout the United States. In Georgia, there's 16 historical covered bridges. And I'll diverge for a moment here and just say that all this is based on a book that Hyris uh, spoke a moment about is that I had published in 2016. Blair Publishing in South Carolina published it, and it's now out of print. And so it's the only way it's available is if you find a used one. I know Amazon lists them on their used site too. But the first covered bridge was built in Philadelphia in 1805, and the oldest one that's standing right now is in New York that was built in 1825. And the oldest bridge in Georgia was built in the 1840s, and that's the Red Oak Bridge in Meriwether County. So bridges are usually built in really idyllic locations and very picturesque locations. And a lot of people think, oh, these bridges were built for aesthetic reasons because it makes them beautiful, et cetera. But they were really built for a very pragmatic reason, and it was simply to protect the wooden bridge from the weather. And that was really the only reason they were built, is to protect it from the weather and make it last much longer. So the end result of all this research was this. This is kind of an outline of the state, and you can see I've highlighted with little squares all these locations, and I included 68 different locations that has 56 mills and 17 covered bridges. In some cases, the mill and the bridge are together. And for purposes of the book, I divided the uh, the book into four sections centered around Atlanta. The Northwest section, the Northeast, Southwest, and Southeast section. And that was just a convenient way to divide the book up and to make it into sections, and also for the reader to be able to focus on a particular area if he was interested in looking for different mills. So from now, for the rest, unless there's any questions, for the rest of it, I'll just go through a collection of the mills and talk a little bit about them. First of all, I'm going to talk about the Northwest section. And on the left is a map that's actually in the book, and it shows that there are 10 grist mills and 2 covered bridges. But for tonight, I'm just going to talk about those that are highlighted on the map on the left. First mill I talked about is Pratter's Mill. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's up almost on the reaches almost the North Georgia or the Georgia-Tennessee line. It's near Dalton. This mill was built in 1855, and in I believe it was 1995, an arsonist actually set fire to the mill, and the interior of the mill and the roof was badly damaged. And now there's a foundation that exists that has stabilized the mill, has put a new roof on, and the foundation exists basically to try to restore the mill to its original condition. I was up there about 2 months ago. There's now a chain link fence around it. It happened to be on a Sunday, so there was nobody around, so I don't know what's happening. I suspect they had to fence it off just to protect it. but it's easy. You can drive right up there. There's lots of parking. They have a festival up there in the fall of each year, and uh, and you can see this bridge from the road, or you can walk around the fence now and see it. The next bridge, one I'll talk about is the Dennis Mill. This is near Chatsworth. It's in, again, North Georgia. You can't really see the mill from the road, or I take it back. You can barely see the mill from the road, and so it's not available open to the public. But it is sits on a there's an Airbnb. The people who own the mill also have an Airbnb on the same property, so you can register with the Airbnb, and it gives you access to the mill and also the grounds, which have a small stream. There's a waterfall on it, and a lot of hiking trails. Uh, this particular mill was built around 1869, and it operated until the 50s. And you'll find that as I go through this, I'll talk about mills. You'll find that most of them operated until about the mid 20th century. Anywhere from 1930s to 1960s, they closed down. And again, that was primarily because of the electrification of Georgia, and also because of and better roads, and also because of the invention of roller mills, which uh, allowed them to produce flour and cornmeal at very high volume and much more cheaper than these mills could produce them. A lot of you have probably seen this mill. It's called Gresham's Mill, and this is located on the intersection of Sixes Road and I-575. And this picture was taken probably around 2015. And I actually took this photo from the road. And I'm told now that it's not as visible from the road. I haven't been there since then, that the owner has planted trees and it's less visible. But I believe you still can go park alongside the road and peek through the trees and see it. I understand the truck is no longer there either. This mill was originally built in 1878, 1880, and it actually existed on the opposite side of the river. In the mid 1960s, the owner moved it over here, over to the present site, and did a lot of restoration on it. And it's actually a very picturesque mill, I think. This is the Lefla Mill. It's on the grounds of the Life University in Marietta, and it is part of the 19th century village recreation that's on that campus. And this mill was originally built. This building was originally built in 1884, and when they recreated it, this building was built in 1884 in Virginia, and then it was transferred to this site when they did the village recreation. And it's located, there was a mill located there. It was the old Sewell Mill, which dates back to the 1830s. And if you ever get a chance to visit, it's well worth the visit. Uh, in my case, I just stopped at the entrance to the university and stopped at the security gate, asked them for permission to roam around the village, and they gave that. I don't know if you have to have permission, but I did. It's convenient parking, and you can go down and roam all you want and photograph it. This bridge, I mean, is the Concord Covered Bridge. It near Smyrna, Georgia. It's still in operational use. It's a one-lane road, being a one, and it's 132 feet, and it was built in 1872. And being a one-way road, there's really no good parking. Uh, Pardon? Being a one-way road, there's really no good parking. So what I would recommend if you want to go see it and get a good photograph is to park at the Concord Road trailhead, and then you can hike to it. There's a trail that will take you right to it. And on that hike, you go by the old Ruff's Grist Mill, which is now just some brick ruins, and the old Concord Woolen Mill, both interesting sites to explore. Going south towards Interstate 20 is the Pine Mountain Gold Mine Mill. This is part of the Villa Rica Parks and Recreation Department. And some people will argue that this is the site of the first gold discovery in Georgia. It is part of the mineral belt that exists in Georgia, but I'm sure the people of Dahlonega would argue that no, Dahlonega was the first gold discovery. But irregardless, this is a great place to visit because not only because of the mill, but they also have a lot of gold memorabilia there, old stamp mills, steam engines, even a small railroad that operates throughout the grounds. It's a very small railroad designed for kids. And the old mill, our Benedict's Mill, which is near Cedartown, this mill was built in 1848 and operated until 1960. And at that time, it was converted to a restaurant. And when I was there, and sometime later, it was converted to a home and a antique mall. And when I was there in 2016, when I took this picture, the owners had were closing the store, and they had intentions of converting it to an event venue. Now, what if they did, I don't really know, but that was the plan back then. Also, near Lindale, just south of Rome, is the old brick mill, or AKA Haas Mill, or AKA Bennett's Mill, or AKA Jones Mill. You'll find a lot of times mills have multiple names, usually because they go through different owners. This mill was originally built by uh, Jones in 1832, and the Union soldiers did quite a bit of damage to it when they came through in the Civil War. But after the Civil War, uh, Captain Jack Haas reconstructed the mill and it was operational. I'm not sure when it quit operating, but it is now maintained by a local historical society. And of course, there's the Yulee Covered Bridge, which is near Yulee. This bridge was built in 1886, and it's near the old Burgess Mill. The stone foundation you see in the foreground right is the old Burgess Grist Mill, but it's long since been destroyed. And this bridge is interesting because it's it's built using what's called the town lattice design. If you've been in any of these covered bridges, you'll see a lot of cross hatches of beams joined by pegs, and that's the technique they used back then for longer distances. But what's interesting, it was built by Washington W. King, who is the son of Horace King, and I'm going to talk about Horace King in a later slide. So that's pretty much the mills and bridges of the Northwest. Now I'm going to switch to the Northeast. In the Northeast, there were 17 grist mills and 5 covered bridges. In the book, I'm going to cover just these that are highlighted in the map on the right. You find a lot more mills or historical mills in the northeast part of Georgia, simply because that's where it's mountainous, and the mills require a certain amount of fall and a certain amount of water flow in order to operate the mills. First one I'm going to talk about is Skeeter Creek Mill. It lies between Suchez and Blairsville, just off of Georgia Highway 60. It sits on a campground, and if you look real close, you can see it as you drive by. But there is a campground there, and the owners are very amenable to allowing people to park on the edge of the campground and walk down to photograph the mill. This picture was taken about 2014, And I was there again about a month ago, and it hasn't changed a bit. There's a few little different decorations on the walls, I think, but it still looks exactly like it did back then. This particular mill was built in 1848, and it is still operational. You can't go inside, but it is occasionally operational. Not sure how often they operate it. I've never seen it operate, but the camp owners tell me they can operate it. Far in the northwest or in the northeast section is Sylvan Falls Mill. It is located near Raven Gap. This mill was built in 1840 and is still fully operational. Uh, it is now a bed and breakfast, and I think they have about four uh, accommodations for four rooms. And the owners are very amenable to visiting the mill, whether you're a guest or not, allow you to walk around the property. Uh, if he's not busy, he'll even fire the mill up and you can see it operate. But all he has to do is open the penstock on the upper level, and the water, instead of flowing over the side, flows into the wheel. This iron wheel was brought from Tennessee in 1952. Originally, it was a wooden wheel, and in 1952, the flume and the iron wheel was brought and set up. So this is a very picturesque mill to visit. And the Stovall Bridge, which is not too far from Satu Nakuchi, this is the uh, shortest freestanding bridge in Georgia. It's 37 feet long, and it's easily available. You can just pull off on the road, and you can park and see the creek and the bridge. And this bridge was originally destroyed by flood, and in 1895, this particular bridge was rebuilt in 1895. This bridge is the Pardue Mill, and this photo is taken in September of 2012. It's near Cleveland. You can see the mill itself is in pretty bad shape. It does have a metal roof, but it's very rusty. The wheel is gone. It's in about ready to fall down, although the dam still stands. This mill was originally built quite late in 1928, 1930 for about a 2 year period. And in 1959, a United Airlines pilot purchased the property and he completely restored it and had it operational. But unfortunately, 1 or 2 years after he did the restoration, he died. And his widow closed up the doors and just never touched it for almost 50 years. Well, just recently, a gentleman purchased the property and he's rebuilding it. This picture was taken in March of 24, and you can see two major things. First of all, he tore the mill down completely to the foundation, actually rebuilt the foundation. If you look close, you can see the old foundation is stone, and you can see now it's poured concrete. And he rebuilt the mill to match the old mill. And if you look to the right, you also see that the dam is gone. There was a flood. I believe it was around 2018 that completely destroyed the dam. And then in September of 2024, this is what the mill looks like. You can see he's painted it. He's put the roof on it, put a porch on the back, and I talked to the owner just last September, and he hopes by November that he'll have actually a wheel uh, mounted to to complete his restoration of the exterior. The wheel he had built on the by someone else out of iron, and he's in the process of assembling it and he'll mount it and have that done by November. His next project is to redo the dam, but it's my understanding he has having a lot of problem working with the Corps of Engineers get permission to work the dam. So we'll follow that process. This is the Laudermilk Mill. It's near Clarksville. You can, if you drive off of Georgia 400 and then take the road to Clarksville, you go right by it and you can see it from the road and you can photograph it from the road. It is on private land. This mill was built in 1880 and it operated until about 1975. But since then, the mill's fallen out of use and it's starting to fall apart. Uh, the owner was a executive that lived in Atlanta, and he just retired a few years ago. And his mother lived on the property, and upon her death, he retired, and then he has renovated the house, and he has now moved to the house that's on the property, which kind of sits behind me where I'm taking a photograph. And he now uses the property as a venue for weddings and other events. His plan is to restore the mill, but he also told me about 5 years ago he was going to restore the mill. That really hasn't happened yet. So we'll see what happens. And this is the Johnson Mill. It's located near Cleveland, and it was built in the 1880s. This is probably one of the more picturesque settings that you'll find for grist mills, I think. This picture was taken in 2005. It sits on maybe an acre and a half of property. The owner lives in a nice house behind this mill, and this property has a little pond on it, along with a, uh, a 19th century or 18th century homestead cabin that you can't see. It's behind the mill and very well kept grounds. This mill is complete and is operational with one exception. It doesn't have any grindstones, therefore it really can't grind anything, but it is operational. One of the things that's really interesting about this mill is that if you look historically, all the old grist mills were built out of wood. And when I say grist mills, I mean also the water wheel, the shaft, all the components of grist mills were built out of wood. And this one still has a wooden water wheel. And note the big shaft in the middle, that still is a solid tree trunk. And so that's typical of what the grist mills were back in the 18th and 19th century. And near Homer is the Ragsdale Mill. This mill was originally built about 1863 and restored in 1967. The flume and the water wheel itself was restored in 1997. And this property is on private property, and it's extremely picturesque. It's a little dirt side road that is it's not open to the public, but there is a sign when you go get to the gate that says if you want to see the mill, to call. His name is Nan Sisk, and it gives a phone number you can call, and he'll give you permission to go see it. On the grounds is also a a general store and two or three old homestead cabins and a cob barn, etc. So it's quite picturesque location. And lastly, in this section, I'm going to talk about the Heelan Mill. This photo was taken in 2015. The mill was originally built in 1852, and you can see this picture in 2015. The mill is in pretty bad shape. It's extremely overgrown. The siding and it is in really bad shape, needs paint. And if you look real close, you'll find that it's about ready to fall down. Uh, when I visited, it wasn't fenced off. You could just walk right up to it. It's located off of 985 near Lula. But Hall County purchased the property in 2019, and they proceeded to restore it. And you can see now the building itself has been completely restored and stabilized. It's painted. You can walk in it now, and it's solid. And Hall County is converting this into a county park. There's still a lot of work that they want to do, and so they don't anticipate that it will be open to the public until 2027. Uh, we This picture was taken in 2019, but as part of the North Georgia Photography Club outing, we got permission from the Hall County Parks Department, and they opened the gate for us, allowed us to go in and photograph this mill. So that was one of the mills that we visited on our travel. Now looking into the southwest section is more or less bordered by I-75 on the east and I-20 on the west. And you can see in the book there's a total of 10 grist mills and 3 covered bridges in this section. And, and the ones I'm going to talk about are the ones on the map on the right. First of all is the Wilkerson Mill. This is near Chattahoochee Hills, and this mill was built around 1875. You can't see this mill from the road, but it is on the grounds of the Wilkerson Mill Gardens, who specialize in hydrangeas. And the owners of the gardens and of this mill in the 80s hired special Amish craftsmen to come in and completely stabilize the mill. They built new beams for support and put in new flooring, all authentic, and and so the mill is quite stable. But the owner's intention was just to stabilize and the building, and now they use it for their own personal gatherings, family gatherings, etc. But if you go to the Wilkerson Mill Gardens and tell them would like to visit the mill, most likely they grant you permission. It's about a 200-yard walk, probably down behind the gardens, and they'll allow you to go down and photograph it. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this mill. This is Starr's Mill. It's This original mill was built in 1825. This building itself was built in 1907, and it operated until 1959. It gained notoriety, of course, with its role in the movie Sweet Home Alabama. But it's now a park, and it's part of the Fayette County water system. But it is a park. You can go there and photograph it uh, uh, from most any angle you wish. The Massengale Mill, also known as the Jones Mill, this original mill was built in 1830 by a gentleman by the name of John Jones. And it was in the mill building, or a large building, was built in 1925. But in 1958, a gentleman by the name of John Massengale raised this dam by 3 feet, creating a much bigger water load, and built the small building to the left, and it's a 125-watt generator, which is still operating. And the present owner, guy by the name of Forbes Matthews, he, is the owner of the property, and he has some heavy machinery equipment at a building that we don't see that's entirely powered by this generator. And it's kind of a historical quirk that's of interest is when Forbes Matthew bought this property in 1994, he did some research and he found that his great-great-grandmother actually was married to the original builder of this mill, or the Jones family. The Red Oak Creek Covered Bridge. This is the about 4 miles from Woodbury, Georgia, and it's the longest wooden bridge in Georgia. at 132 feet. And when I say the longest wooden bridge, that includes the uncovered portion or the boardwalk that you see in the foreground. This this bridge, I mean, was built in the 1840s by Horace King. If you recall, I mentioned his son, Washington King. Horace King's a pretty interesting character. He was born in 1804 as a slave, and he, either through what he was taught or through his natural abilities, he had great engineering skills, and he was very skillful at building bridges. Recognizing that skill, the Alabama legislature granted him his freedom, and then he formed, along with his son, Washington King, an organization, a building organization, and he traveled around the South and built covered bridges throughout the South. And so it's a quite fascinating figure. There's a long story, much longer story, and more interesting than what I just narrated, but a very fascinating man. This is the Tobler Mill near Yatesville, and it was built in 1924. And in 2003, it was completely restored. So it is a fully operational mill. I did meet the owner with this mill, and we went on the property and we toured the property. He uh, he fired the mill up. Basically, you had to pull one lever, and he diverted the water that you see coming out of the side of the plume into the water wheel, and it began to fully operate. He has a little bit of a living quarters on the mill, et cetera, but it is completely restored. It's not open to the public. You can see it from the road. Georgia Highway 75 uh, crosses the creek right here, and you can stop alongside the road and see it from the distance. But it's a very fully operational mill. And the Chunky Creek Bridge, or Hootenville Bridge, is this bridge was originally built in 1892 by Dr. Herring, and it was destroyed in 1997 by a tropical storm Alberto, but was restored using federal disaster relief funds. So it's a very picturesque location. It's easy to get to. There's again, if you refer to the Georgia Department of Transportation, you can look this creek up, this bridge up, and you'll find uh, exactly how to get to it. A little more remote mill is the Chappelle Mill. Now, this mill is owned by the same individual that owns the Yatesville Mill or Tobler Mill. And this is located on the old site of the town of Milner, which doesn't exist anymore, but at the uh, turn of the century, it was a quite thriving community. But now there's nothing left except the mill and some old foundations and stone foundations. It was originally settled in 1821, and but the mill's about ready to fall down. The owner and I, we walked on the property, and we actually went into the underneath the mill where all the mechanisms were. And frankly, I was a little nervous. We both a little nervous, honestly, as we stood there because it felt like if we even leaned against some of the beams, the whole thing might collapse on us. So we quickly got out from under it. I haven't been there since about 2016, so I'm not sure what its status is now. And the Big Chief Mill, the this is located near Buena Vista. It's on the site of the old Powell's Mill. You can see the Powell's Mill pond there. This building itself was built in 1994. Again, it's a fully operational mill, and it produces produce for the local farmers in the area. So it, it's a fully operational mill. Then the Cohilee Creek Covered Bridge is this bridge is 96 feet long, and it was built in 1891 and restored in 1984. and is the furthest southern bridge, covered bridge in the United States. And it's almost down to, it's near Blakely, Georgia, and it's almost down to the corner of the Alabama-Georgia border. And extremely picturesque location. There's a nice park nearby. You can park there and then roam in the grounds to do a little photography. Okay, switching to the last section, the southeast section. There's a total of 19 grist mills and 7 covered bridges in the southeast section. You find a lot of mills and bridges in this area. A lot of the reason is because it's located along the fall line, which is where the transition from the coastal plains to the uh, to the Piedmont area, and so there's uh, a fair amount of water drop. So you see a lot of mills along the fall line. First one we visit is one we visited on the North Georgia uh, photography tour. This is Sells Mill, which is located in Jackson County. This mill opened in 1914, both uh, as a grist mill and also as a power generating facility. You can see I took this photo from the other end of the dam, and that provides the water. And this mill operated until the 1990s, and now, but then it stopped operating, in Jackson County purchased it and converted it to a park. It's an extremely nice park. Good parking there. You can walk around the mill, around the dam, nice little shelter, and some picnic areas as well. And what I consider to be one of the more picturesque covered bridges is the Watson Mill covered bridge. This covered bridge was built in, uh, well, I don't have I'm not sure the exact date it was built offhand, but it is a state park, and this is the longest covered bridge in Georgia. It's 229 feet long. And this mill was also built by Washington King. You recall he is the son of Horace King. If you walk downstream from this, you will find a grist mill, the ruins of an old grist mill, but there's really not much to see. It's just basically a foundation for the mill. But this is a very picturesque park, and you can still drive through it. The road goes through the bridge itself, and you can see the morning hours there was sunrise, and there's a little fog rising too. The Sparta Mill are also known as the Shotoborn Mill. It's on Shotoborn Creek, and this mill was built approximately 1790, and it's near, as I said, this is Shotoborn Creek, and it's near where a treaty was signed between Georgia and the Creek Federation in 1784. So there's a lot of historical significance in this area too. As I said, this mill was built in 1790, so it's really one of the oldest mills, and it fell into disuse in 1990. When I was there, it was open and some people were cleaning it up, so I was able to walk around the mill quite a bit. And there was like uh, uh, three grinding operations, so it was a major operation. And I talked to the owner of this mill a few years ago, and she is a retired IBM executive and is restoring the mill. I don't think she's necessarily plans to restore it to fully operational, but she is converting it to electrical generation. She has water power there, a nice dam, and she's installing electrical generators to provide power. And her plan at that time was also to convert it to uh, a event center. And this was back in 2017. I'm not sure what the status is at this moment. The Ogeechee River Mill is located near Warrington, and this mill was built in 1826. Since I've taken this picture, the owner has re-sided and repainted the mill, so it's now bright red. And the owner is her name is Missy Franklin, and she's uh, was a cattle farmer in Florida, and she wanted to move her operation to Georgia. So she purchased this property and found out that the mill was sitting on it too. It's a fully operational mill, and she occasionally operates it. It's not open constantly to the public. If you do drive down there, you can see it from the road. But if you make a little prior arrangement with her, she is most amenable to allowing people to go on the property if you make prior arrangement. Also, she opens it up often to school children to tour and to use as educational facility. The Chappelle Mill, which is not really related to the other Chappelle Mill, this is located just a bit north of Dublin. This mill was built in 1811 and it operated continuously for 186 years until 1997 when it shut down. Uh, it is it's about 2 or 3 miles off a highway on a dirt road, but it's easy to stop and take some photographs. It finally shut down. It was a major supplier of flour to a lot of grocery stores in the south, in the southeast part of Georgia, but it finally fell to competition through the big flour milling companies with their roller mills. But it's a very picturesque location. And lastly, we're going to talk about the Jordan Mill. This mill was established in 1857 and it was originally known as the Heinz Mill and renamed the Jordan Mill in 1873. The original mill that was built in 1857 burned to the ground in 1920, and this building then was built to replace it in 1928. Now, there were some mills that I didn't include in the book, and this one is John's Mill, and that's kind of my name because the guy who owns it, his name is John. This is near Talking Rock. It is an operational mill. Um, the owner would not permit me to publish it. Now, he allowed me to roam the grounds and take photographs and use them in conditions like this, but he did not want me to put any information on the book and where it was located uh, in the book. The original mill was built in 1855. This mill, a building, was built in 1958 by John, who was very, very young at the time, and his father. They moved down from Tennessee and established uh, a residence there and then began to build this mill. And as I said, he's fully operational now. Another mill is, I call it Bear Gap Mill, simply because it's on Bear Gap Road between Clarksville and Lake Raven. And I just found this while I was driving the back roads. It sits on a Christian retreat center, and when I talked to the owner, they didn't really know the history. They just purchased the property, and and this building and wheel, et cetera, was on the property when they purchased it. There's really no equipment in the building, so it's really mostly decorative. Another mill was Dew's Mill. This is about 10 miles east of Calhoun. Some equipment remained. The building, all the equipment was sold at auction in 2015. And I really discovered this after the publication of the book, so it's not in the book. And another mill that didn't get in the book was the Stapleton Mill. It's in Jefferson County. It was originally built in 1869. It was operational until the 1990s. I really couldn't find a good history of this book, so I really didn't include it. And lastly, when I visited the refurbished Heaton Mill in Hall County, the uh, the park director who I was visiting asked me if I knew about the Gilstrap Mill, and I did not know about it. In all my research, I didn't come across it. This is on Wahoo Creek in North Hall County, and it was estimated to have been built in the 1880s. The water wheel's gone, but there's still the equipment intact inside, and the millstones and all the mechanism is still inside. You can see it from the road, which is bordered by where that fence is. I actually stopped and I talked to the owners, and they were very gracious, uh, and gave me actually served me a cup of coffee, and we had a long chat, and she allowed me to roam the property and take photographs. So that really summarizes it. As I said earlier, this is based on a book, and the title of the book is Vanishing Landmarks of Georgia, Grist Mills and Covered Bridges. And the book is out of print and it's only available as a used book. I do have some. If someone wanted to buy one, I'd be more than happy to accommodate you. But I'll open up to any questions anybody may have after that. Anything?
Joseph, I don't know about the questions, but it's fascinating. There's a whole lot going on around this state.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of hidden gems throughout the state.
Hey, Joseph, I didn't pay attention. The mill that you had your last slide with uh, with the stone bridge. Where what is that one? That's really nice.
Oh, that's Berry College.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll see that one in a couple of
See
Yeah,
weeks.
that
you'll
with
be there probably in a few days.
Yeah, that's good. That's nice to know. The I've never seen that before.
Yeah,
I
I
uh,
thought that stone
I
bridge was
really
picturesque.
enjoyed. Uh, I'm sorry. I really enjoyed everything that you showed to us. It makes me realize just how important water was to certain functions within the state, as in any other state, I guess, but here especially. Thank you.
You're welcome.
enjoy that a lot. Any more questions, folks? Joseph, thank you, sir.
I'll
We
stop my
appreciate it.
share. There we
All
go.
right. That's great. Anything, anybody else? We're good, Joseph. Thank you. We're going to be signing off now.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks again.
Nice job, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa, you got anything else?
I don't have a thing.
Well, thanks to everyone for signing on tonight. Uh, I saw
Oh,
some neat stuff.
I just got one more thing. Should have.
Standard's going to wake up to know that. Oh, now he's stirring. Uh, cameras are really kind of cool times. Uh, but
We got next month. We're going to Eva Polak, impressionistic photography. So that should be kind of fascinating.
that's great. Well, Carlos, thank you, and thank everyone who signed on this evening. And Joseph, a double thanks to you.
Oh, you're
Thank you,
welcome.
sir. Appreciate it.
Glad to do it.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good
Okay.
night.
Bye-bye.